My son collapsed during PE with a heart condition. The coach said, "No phones during class," while I begged the secretary to call 911 from the parking lot. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from my 16-year-old son, Lucas. "Dad, something's really wrong with my heart. It's beating super fast and I can't catch my breath. I'm in PE right now and Coach Brennan won't let me sit down." The words hit me like ice water in my veins. Lucas had been born with a complex congenital heart defect that required open-heart surgery when he was 4 years old. We'd spent years managing his condition with regular cardiology appointments and strict activity restrictions. I'd sent detailed medical documentation to Lincoln High at the beginning of the school year. Lucas's cardiologist, Dr. Angela Moss, had written explicit instructions about recognizing the warning signs of cardiac distress: rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, or fatigue during exercise were red flags requiring immediate intervention. I'd met personally with Coach Brennan, the school nurse, and Principal Davies to review Lucas's condition and emergency protocols. They'd all nodded and assured me they understood the seriousness. My hands shook as I tried calling Lucas immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. PE classes had a strict no-phone policy, and students had to leave their devices in lockers during the period. I grabbed my keys and sprinted through the office while dialing the school's main number. The phone rang 6 times before the secretary answered with her usual monotone voice. "Lincoln High School. This is Donna speaking. How may I help you?" I told her this was Michael Martinez, and I had a medical emergency involving my son Lucas in PE class. I explained Lucas's heart condition while running to my car in the parking lot. "He's texting me that he can't breathe, and his heart is racing. This is exactly what his cardiologist warned us about. Someone needs to get to that gymnasium right now and check on him." Donna put me on hold without saying anything while I fumbled with my car keys. The hold music played for what felt like an eternity, some generic instrumental version of a song I couldn't identify. I was already backing out of my parking space when she finally came back on the line. Donna said she'd spoken with Coach Brennan, who reported that all students were participating normally in PE activities. Lucas was running laps with his classmates and showed no signs of distress. She suggested that teenagers often exaggerate minor discomfort to avoid exercise, especially when they know their parents will intervene. I could feel my blood pressure spiking as I tried to explain that Lucas had never complained about PE before, and that his heart condition wasn't something to take lightly. She said she'd make a note of my concern in his file. I hung up and immediately called back, this time asking specifically to speak with Principal Davies. Donna said he was in a district meeting and couldn't be interrupted unless it was a true emergency. I told her a student having cardiac symptoms during physical activity was absolutely a true emergency. She put me on hold again while I sped through traffic lights, laying on my horn when cars moved too slowly. When she returned, she said the principal was unavailable, but she'd spoken with the school nurse who would check on Lucas during her next rounds. The next rounds. Like Lucas was a patient in a hospital ward instead of a kid who might be having a heart attack in PE class. I tried explaining that cardiac emergencies required immediate attention, not whenever it was convenient for the nursing staff's schedule. Donna's tone got defensive as she reminded me that the school had protocols to follow and couldn't disrupt educational activities based on every parental phone call. She said if Lucas was truly experiencing a medical emergency, he would have asked to go to the nurse's office himself. 23 minutes had passed since Lucas's original text when I screeched into the school parking lot. I tried calling him again while jogging toward the main entrance, but still got his voicemail. The automated message played his 14-year-old voice saying he couldn't answer right now, but would call back soon. I'd made him record it 2 years ago when he first got the phone, and hearing his younger self made my chest tight with panic about what might be happening to him right now in that gymnasium. Donna was waiting for me at the front desk with her arms crossed and a visitor's badge in her hand. She explained that I couldn't simply storm onto campus and demand to see my son during instructional time. School policy required all visitors to sign in, provide photo identification, and wait for administrative approval before accessing any area where students were present. The safety and security of all students had to be protected, which meant following established procedures regardless of the circumstances bringing parents to campus. I filled out the visitor forms while my hands shook with adrenaline and fear. The paperwork asked for ridiculous details like the purpose of my visit and expected duration. I wrote medical emergency in capital letters across multiple sections, while Donna processed my driver's license with deliberate slowness. She made copies of my ID, checked my name against some database on her computer, and printed out a visitor badge with my photo and the current date and timestamp. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably 8 minutes, Donna called the PE department to announce I was coming to check on Lucas. I could hear Coach Brennan's voice through the phone receiver saying something about interruptions to class time. Donna nodded and told me the coach would meet me at the gymnasium entrance to discuss my concerns about Lucas's participation in PE activities. She emphasized that I couldn't simply enter the gym and disrupt the class without proper authorization from the coaching staff. I walked as fast as possible through the hallways while trying not to run, since Donna had warned me that running on campus would violate safety protocols. The journey from the main office to the gymnasium took 4 minutes of navigating corridors filled with student artwork and motivational posters. Every second felt crucial when Lucas might be collapsed on the gym floor. I kept checking my phone for new messages, but there was nothing since his original text about not being able to breathe. Coach Brennan met me at the gymnasium doors wearing his usual tracksuit and whistle around his neck. He was a large man in his 50s who'd been coaching at Lincoln High for over 20 years. He seemed annoyed by the interruption and immediately started explaining that Lucas appeared to be fine and was participating normally in the day's activities. The class was doing conditioning exercises, including running laps, push-ups, and jumping jacks. Lucas was keeping up with his peers and showed no signs of distress or medical problems. I tried to explain Lucas's heart condition and the specific symptoms I was concerned about, but Coach Brennan interrupted me. He said he'd dealt with thousands of students over his career and could recognize when kids were genuinely sick versus when they were trying to avoid exercise. He'd seen Lucas's medical paperwork at the beginning of the year, but the boy had been participating in PE without problems for months. Today was no different from any other day. Through the small window in the gymnasium door, I could see students scattered around the basketball court doing various exercises. I scanned the group frantically, looking for Lucas among the 25 kids in matching PE uniforms. Finally, I spotted him near the far wall, but something was wrong with how he was moving. Instead of running with the smooth stride I knew from watching him play in our backyard, Lucas was moving slowly with his hand pressed against his chest. His face was pale and he kept stopping to lean against the wall. Coach Brennan followed my gaze and waved dismissively. He said Lucas was probably just out of shape from summer vacation and needed to build up his endurance gradually. Some students required more time to adjust to the physical demands of PE class. He'd been encouraging Lucas to push through the discomfort and build character by not giving up when exercise became challenging. That's how young men developed mental toughness and learned to overcome obstacles in life. I watched in horror as Lucas stumbled and nearly fell while attempting to rejoin his running group. Two other students had to steady him as he swayed on his feet. His lips looked blue even from a distance, and he was clutching his chest with both hands now. Coach Brennan finally seemed to notice that something might actually be wrong and opened the gymnasium door to call out to Lucas. His voice echoed across the basketball court as he shouted for Lucas to walk it off and get back in line with the other runners. Lucas tried to respond to the coach's command, but his legs gave out completely, and he collapsed onto the hardwood floor. The sound of his body hitting the ground was audible even from where I stood in the doorway. Other students immediately stopped their exercises and gathered around Lucas, who was lying motionless on his back with his eyes closed. Several kids started shouting that something was wrong with Lucas and that someone needed to call for help immediately. Coach Brennan jogged over to where Lucas had fallen and knelt down beside him. I pushed past the coach and ran onto the court without permission, dropping to my knees next to my son. Lucas's skin was gray and clammy with sweat. His breathing was rapid and shallow. When I took his wrist to check his pulse, his heart was beating so fast and irregularly that I couldn't count the beats. His eyes fluttered open, and he whispered that his chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but Coach Brennan grabbed my wrist and said no phones were allowed in the gymnasium during PE class. He said the school had protocols for medical situations, and I needed to let trained professionals handle this appropriately. He would call the nurse's office using the proper channels while I stayed calm and avoided creating panic among the other students. He actually argued with me about calling emergency services while my son was clearly in cardiac distress on the floor. I yanked my arm free and dialed 911 anyway, explaining to the dispatcher that I had a 16-year-old male with a known heart condition who had collapsed during PE class. The dispatcher asked about Lucas's symptoms and current condition, while Coach Brennan stood over me complaining about parents who created chaos by refusing to follow school policies. She said paramedics were being dispatched immediately and would arrive within 8 to 12 minutes, depending on traffic conditions. The school nurse finally appeared, summoned by a student who had been sent to fetch her, when Coach Brennan realized the situation was serious. Nurse Patricia Williams was a registered nurse with 20 years of experience who immediately recognized the severity of Lucas's condition. She brought portable oxygen and began monitoring his vital signs while explaining that his heart rate was dangerously elevated and irregular. She said the symptoms were consistent with a serious cardiac event requiring immediate hospitalization. Other students were crying and asking if Lucas was going to die. Coach Brennan was trying to maintain order by telling everyone to sit down and stay calm, but his own voice was shaking now that he realized how badly he'd misjudged the situation. Nurse Williams sent a student to prop open the gymnasium doors for the paramedics while she continued administering oxygen and monitoring Lucas's condition. She asked me about his medical history and current medications while keeping her fingers on his pulse. Paramedics arrived 11 minutes after my 911 call and immediately took control of the scene. They attached cardiac monitoring equipment that showed Lucas's heart rhythm on a small screen with beeping alarms. The lead paramedic looked at the irregular pattern and immediately called for advanced life support backup while starting an IV line in Lucas's arm. They gave him medications to try stabilizing his heart rhythm while preparing to transport him to the nearest hospital with pediatric cardiac capabilities. The medications began working within minutes, and Lucas's heart rate started becoming more regular. His color improved slightly, and his breathing became less labored. The paramedic explained that Lucas was experiencing supraventricular tachycardia, a potentially life-threatening arrhythmia that could cause cardiac arrest if not treated promptly. The delay in recognizing his symptoms and calling for help had allowed the condition to worsen significantly. Every minute had mattered in preventing permanent damage to his heart. As they loaded Lucas onto the stretcher, Coach Brennan approached me with tears in his eyes. He apologized profusely for not recognizing the seriousness of Lucas's symptoms and for preventing me from calling 911 immediately. He said he'd never encountered a student with a real cardiac emergency before and had assumed Lucas was trying to avoid exercise. He promised he would never again ignore a parent's medical concerns or delay emergency response for any reason. At Memorial Hospital, pediatric cardiologist Dr. Rebecca Chen met us in the emergency department. She'd been Lucas's specialist since his original surgery and was familiar with his complex case. After reviewing the EKG readings from the ambulance, she explained that Lucas had experienced a dangerous episode of rapid irregular heartbeat that could have been fatal without immediate intervention. The structural defect in his heart had worsened over time, making him increasingly susceptible to these life-threatening arrhythmias. Dr. Chen admitted Lucas to the pediatric intensive care unit for continuous cardiac monitoring and further testing. Over the next 48 hours, she performed echocardiograms, stress tests, and electrophysiology studies to assess the current state of his heart defect. The results showed significant deterioration since his last checkup 6 months earlier. The electrical pathways in his heart were becoming increasingly unstable, requiring surgical intervention to prevent future episodes. She recommended immediate placement of an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, a device that would monitor Lucas's heart rhythm continuously and deliver electrical shocks if dangerous arrhythmias occurred. The device would save his life if he experienced cardiac arrest, but it also meant acknowledging that his condition had progressed beyond what medications and lifestyle modifications could manage safely. At 16, Lucas would have a mechanical device in his chest for the rest of his life. The surgery to implant the ICD was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Chen explained the procedure in detail, including the risks and long-term implications for Lucas's activities and lifestyle. He would need to avoid contact sports permanently and be careful around electromagnetic fields that could interfere with the device. Regular checkups would be required to monitor the device function and download data about his heart rhythms. While Lucas recovered in the hospital, I started researching what had gone wrong at the school and how similar emergencies could be prevented in the future. I discovered that the district had minimal training requirements for coaches regarding student medical conditions. Coach Brennan had received basic CPR certification, but nothing specific about recognizing cardiac symptoms in young athletes. The school's emergency response protocols were vague and relied heavily on individual judgment calls. I requested copies of all documentation related to Lucas's case, including the medical information I'd provided at the beginning of the year and records of my emergency phone calls. The district initially resisted providing these records, citing privacy concerns and ongoing internal review of the incident. I hired attorney David Kim, who specialized in educational negligence cases, to help obtain the documentation and determine whether the school's response had met appropriate standards of care. The records revealed disturbing gaps in communication and training. Coach Brennan had never read Lucas's medical file despite receiving it months earlier. The emergency protocols were unclear about when to call 911 versus when to handle situations internally. Most concerning was a pattern of dismissing parental medical concerns as overprotective behavior. Multiple families had complained about coaches and staff ignoring student health issues, but no systematic changes had been implemented. Attorney Kim filed a formal complaint with the state education department, alleging that the district had violated federal disability laws by failing to provide appropriate accommodations for Lucas's medical condition. The Americans with Disabilities Act required schools to have individualized health plans for students with chronic conditions and to train staff on recognizing emergency symptoms. Lincoln High had done neither effectively, putting Lucas and other medically fragile students at unnecessary risk. The complaint triggered a federal investigation into the district's handling of students with medical conditions. Investigators interviewed dozens of families, reviewed training records, and examined emergency response procedures across all schools in the district. They found systematic deficiencies in medical emergency preparedness and staff training. Several other students had experienced delayed or inappropriate responses to medical crises, though none as severe as Lucas's cardiac arrest. During the investigation, more disturbing details emerged about the day Lucas collapsed. Security camera footage showed that I had called the school 37 minutes before paramedics were finally summoned. Phone records proved that Donna had dismissed my emergency calls without consulting medical personnel or checking on Lucas's condition. Coach Brennan had been told multiple times that a parent was calling about cardiac symptoms, but he'd continued running the class normally. The footage also showed Lucas displaying obvious signs of distress for over 20 minutes before collapsing. He'd been leaning against walls, clutching his chest, and moving much slower than other students. Multiple classmates had approached Coach Brennan to express concern about Lucas's condition, but the coach had dismissed their observations and ordered them to focus on their own exercises. The visual evidence was damning proof of negligence. Lucas's ICD implantation surgery was successful, though recovery was complicated by his young age and active lifestyle. Dr. Chen had to carefully program the device to distinguish between normal teenage heart rate increases during activities versus dangerous arrhythmias requiring intervention. Lucas would need to learn to live with the knowledge that his heart could stop beating at any moment, but the device would restart it automatically if that happened. The psychological impact was significant for both of us. Lucas developed anxiety about physical activities and worried constantly about his heart rhythm. I found myself checking on him obsessively, afraid to let him out of my sight. We both started therapy to help process the trauma of the cardiac emergency and adjust to the reality of living with an implanted device. The therapist helped us understand that hypervigilance was a normal response to a life-threatening medical event. 3 months after the surgery, the federal investigation concluded with a scathing report about the district's failures in medical emergency preparedness. The investigators found violations of disability laws, inadequate staff training, and systematic dismissal of parental medical concerns. They mandated comprehensive reforms, including mandatory medical training for all staff, individualized emergency plans for students with chronic conditions, and clear protocols for responding to parental emergency calls. The district was required to hire a full-time medical coordinator to oversee student health services and ensure compliance with federal disability laws. All coaches and PE teachers had to complete specialized training in recognizing cardiac emergencies, diabetic crises, severe allergic reactions, and seizure disorders. The training included hands-on scenarios and annual recertification requirements to maintain current knowledge of emergency response procedures. Principal Davies was reassigned to a district office position after the investigation revealed his failure to implement proper medical emergency protocols. Coach Brennan was suspended for 2 weeks without pay and required to complete additional training before returning to teaching duties. Donna received a formal reprimand for her dismissive handling of emergency phone calls and was required to complete customer service training focused on crisis communication. The district also implemented new technology systems to improve emergency response times. A direct hotline was established for parents calling about medical emergencies, bypassing the main office and connecting directly to trained medical personnel. All staff members received emergency communication devices that could summon paramedics immediately without requiring administrative approval or following lengthy protocols that delayed care. Lucas returned to school 4 months after his cardiac arrest with comprehensive accommodations and a detailed emergency action plan. He was exempted from PE class and given alternative assignments that didn't involve physical exertion. Teachers were trained to recognize signs of cardiac distress and knew to call 911 immediately if Lucas reported any symptoms. He carried emergency medications and had unrestricted access to his phone for medical communications. The accommodation process revealed additional students who had been struggling with inadequate medical support at school. Several families came forward with stories of dismissive treatment and delayed emergency responses. The district established a medical advisory committee, including parents, healthcare providers, and advocates to review policies and ensure that student health needs were prioritized appropriately. Lucas and I joined the committee to help prevent other families from experiencing similar emergencies. Dr. Chen was pleased with Lucas's adjustment to the ICD and his improved heart function 6 months after implantation. The device had not needed to deliver any shocks, indicating that his heart rhythm was remaining stable with the support of the technology. She cleared him for light physical activities like walking and swimming, though competitive sports remained off-limits permanently. Lucas would need device monitoring every 3 months and battery replacement surgery approximately every 10 years. The legal settlement with the district included compensation for Lucas's medical expenses, pain and suffering, and ongoing healthcare needs related to the ICD. More importantly, it established a medical emergency fund to ensure rapid response capabilities for all students with chronic health conditions. The settlement also required annual training updates and regular audits to verify that emergency protocols were being followed consistently across all schools. Lucas decided to channel his experience into advocacy work, speaking at school board meetings and medical conferences about the importance of cardiac emergency preparedness in schools. He worked with the American Heart Association to develop educational materials for coaches and teachers about recognizing heart problems in young athletes. His story became part of training programs designed to prevent similar emergencies through better awareness and faster response times. A year after his cardiac arrest, Lucas was thriving academically and had discovered a passion for biomedical engineering. He wanted to design better cardiac devices for young people and improve emergency response technologies for schools. His near-death experience had given him purpose and direction that might never have emerged under normal circumstances. He often said that surviving had taught him not to waste time on things that didn't matter. The district's new medical emergency protocols were tested several times during Lucas's senior year, with dramatic improvements in response times and outcomes. A student with type 1 diabetes received immediate treatment for severe hypoglycemia instead of being told to tough it out. A girl with asthma got her inhaler and medical attention within minutes instead of being ignored until she collapsed. The systemic changes were saving lives and preventing the kind of trauma our family had endured. Lucas graduated as salutatorian and received early admission to several top engineering programs with full scholarships. During his graduation speech, he thanked Dr. Chen for saving his life and the advocates who fought for system changes after his emergency. He challenged his classmates to speak up when they witnessed problems that put people at risk and to never accept dangerous situations as normal just because they'd always existed that way. 2 years later, Lucas is studying biomedical engineering at MIT with a focus on cardiac devices and emergency response systems. His ICD continues to function perfectly, monitoring his heart rhythm and providing backup protection against dangerous arrhythmias. He volunteers with organizations that support young people with heart conditions and advocates for better medical emergency preparedness in schools nationwide. The boy who nearly died in PE class is now working to save other kids with similar conditions.